CNN host Michael Smirkanish decided to awkwardly fawn over Michael Bloomberg in one of the grossest and weirdest segments I've seen in a while.
I'm Michael Smirkanish in New York City today and wondering why all the hostility toward Michael Bloomberg. The former mayor of New York City formally entered the presidential race this week. He was greeted with a torrent of nasty headlines. Take a look at these. No other Democratic candidate was so coldly welcomed into the race. Bloomberg got no honeymoon. Think about it. When Elizabeth Warren announced, did the initial coverage speak to her, quote, baggage? Did the first round of stories about Bernie Sanders address the, quote, huge barriers he'd confront? Anybody ever use the word groan regarding Kamala Harris? Anyone ever say disqualify soon after Amy Klobuchar announced? No way. It's been a total double standard, with much of the animus directed at Bloomberg's wealth. Instead of focusing on the fact that he's the son of a middle-class accountant who earned his money himself, and that by not accepting donations, he did not prostitute himself to the political process, his self-financing is cast as a negative and his uniquely American story largely ignored. Well, I have a different perspective. I say, welcome, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your willingness to enter what TR described as the arena. You've been in this race just a week, and already your face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. You don't need this. You could spend the rest of your years with your feet up in Bermuda. Hell, you could buy Bermuda, but you choose to continue to contribute, both with your donations and with your talents. Your ethics seem above reproach. You're a data-driven non-ideologue. And by most accounts, New York City benefited from your leadership of 12 years. So I say good luck. You can have my salt shaker and my sugary drink. Just make the trains run on time.
I mean, where do you begin with this? You do know that that's like literally an argument that was used for fascism, right? Like, well, at least they make the trains run on time. The whole point of that was to say, wow, don't be misled into thinking that just because something is orderly means it is by definition positive. But he brings it up as if it's positive. Like, but just make the trains run on time and it's all good. Okay. First of all, his whole premise is wrong because I've seen plenty of articles agreeing with Bloomberg. I know because I've got angry as I read through them. There have been quite a few of them. Second of all, I would bet a significant amount of money. Start the clock from the second Bloomberg got into the race until the second he drops out. Bloomberg will get a lot more positive coverage than Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, and Andrew Yang. Those three have been repeatedly snubbed by mainstream media in different ways. In the case of Andrew Yang, they literally take him off the screen when citing the polls. Cory Booker and Kamala Harris will be polling below him, but they omit Yang, take him out, and put those two in. Insanity. One time they called him John Yang. I don't know if it was MSNBC or CNN or whoever it was, but it's just ridiculous. Tulsi, they can't go 3.5 minutes without calling her, an Assad puppet, a dictator lover, a Russian plant, whatever. All of that is absurd, ridiculous, smearing somebody who is in the U.S. military. You're going to say this person's a traitor, this person's doing treason. They're in the U.S. She's in the U.S. military today, to this day. If you want to disagree with her own policy, that's fine, but they don't do that. They go right for the smear attacks. In the case of Bernie, oh my God, we don't even need to go over it. That's half the show on this show we're covering is, look at this thing they said about Bernie. Look at that thing they said about Bernie. Look at how they mischaracterize him. Look at how they're bending over backwards to avoid saying his name and talking about him as much as possible, even when he's polling strongly in second place. They did a headline like Biden leads and Buttigieg in a strong fourth. What? It's endless. It's endless. So you want to talk about media bias? Let's talk about media bias, Michael Smirkanish. Oh, please. Bloomberg's got media bias. You do know two guys just dropped out. Joe Sestak and I'm blanking on the other one. See, even I'm blanking on him, and I'm like, and I follow this stuff like really closely. Sandra Bullock. Steve Bullock, whatever. Sandra, I call him. So they both dropped out. They were both, if I'm not mistaken, public officials. One of them was the highest ranking military official running for president. You know how much coverage they got? Next to none. Okay? Michael Bloomberg jumped in late, is skipping the first 4 contests, and he's getting way more coverage than they ever got. So, really, the bias here is in favor of him. The only reason he's being taken seriously at all is because he's spending $37 million. He's doing a $37 million ad buy. So, he's buying legitimacy in this race. That's what he's doing. And by the way, Michael Smirkanish, maybe he's an honest actor. I don't know. But maybe he's saying kind things because he knows that Bloomberg News could be a future employer of his. There is a problem there because the $37 million isn't just to try to buy support from the public and have them see his ads and maybe changes some minds and makes people want to vote for him. But it's also, who really likes that? The networks. The networks love. They're getting rich off Michael Bloomberg. So, of course, they're going to give him more positive coverage, and that's what you're seeing here. So he's got the dynamic exactly backwards, but that's obvious to you guys, but it's so disingenuous how he's presenting it. Then he goes on to say, Michael Bloomberg, are they focusing on the fact that he's the son of middle-class accountants? No. Who cares? I don't care. I don't care what happened with Kamala's parents. I don't care what happened with Amy Klobuchar's parents. I don't care what happened with Bloomberg's parents. I don't care what happened with Bernie's parents. I don't care. I care about what they're going to do with the country. What's their ideology? What's their philosophy? We're not voting for a significant other. Ooh, tell me your backstory. Who gives a shit? I care about what you're going to do. Why are you a child? You're on CNN and you're a child. And then he says, these are the 2 parts that got under my skin the most. One of them is, him self-financing is more pure. So wait a second. You agree, then, that the campaign contributions from billionaires and the campaign contributions from corporations, that's corruption. You agree with that. Because what you just said implies heavily that you agree with that. And you think, well, the self-financing is obviously better than that because it's not corrupt. Okay, well then let me ask you a question. Why are you not then, number 1, calling all the people who are taking the corporate money and the billionaire money corrupt? Because he's not doing that. And number 2, why are you not giving credit to Bernie Sanders? Because Bernie Sanders is raising through small dollar donations alone. So, as much as you like self-financing, it's a lot better than self-financing? Raising small dollar donations alone. Because then you're representing the will of your donors, who are the American people. Whereas Michael Bloomberg, self-financing, but he's representing himself and his own ideas and his own ideology, which is better than representing the corporations, but it's not as good as representing the American people. So why are you not... he's trying to carve it out to be a special argument in favor of Bloomberg, but he would never actually say what logically follows, which is, I guess, Amy Klobuchar and Mayor Pete and Joe Biden and all these other candidates, I guess they're all corrupt, right? And they're off the table because they're in the swamp. He would never actually say that. And he would never give Bernie credit for doing the thing that's even better than the self-financing. By the way, self-financing, that really is some oligarchy shit too when it comes down to it. Because I'm sure there's somebody who would make a wonderful president who's living in rural Wyoming right now, but they don't have billions of dollars, so they can't just jump in the race and get the coverage. So it's oligarchy stuff, and you're defending oligarchy and acting like it's pure and democratic. It's not. That's not. And then the final thing is, he said, Michael Bloomberg is a data-driven non-ideologue. Totally untrue. Totally untrue. Of course he has an ideology. Everybody has an ideology. Nobody's purely data-driven. You need a framework through which to view the data. Now, you could have the data inform your framework and tweak it, but Bloomberg doesn't do that. Bloomberg has an ideology. This is a guy who blocked a minimum wage increase in New York City as mayor. That's not non-ideological. That's deeply ideological, and that's corporatist, and that's neoliberal. That's what that ideology is. That's what that philosophy is. He banned big gulps. He banned big sodas. That's ideological. That's deeply ideological, and that's authoritarian. That's what that is. He wants to control you when it comes to your life and your social issues and the decisions that you make. This is a guy who said that, spoke about marijuana, legalizing marijuana as a terrible idea. That's ideological. Again, authoritarian is what that is. It's not, there is no you could look at data and have different interpretations of that data. You have to have a philosophical framework through which you analyze stuff. And this is the line I can't stand, guys, is that, and he's proving it so clearly, he thinks centrist, corporatist neoliberals are just above the fray truth tellers. That's what he thinks. Me? I'm not ideological because sometimes I agree with Republicans and sometimes I agree with Democrats. Well, I got news for you. If you're agreeing with the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats, pretty much across the board, you're going to be terrible. Because the only things they agree on are things to screw you. And that's what he is. He acts like, I'm so above the fray. Sometimes I agree with the right, sometimes I agree with the left. But your ideology, just because you don't like labels, doesn't mean that there isn't a label that fits your ideology. And there is that. He lives under this childish delusion that just picked the midpoint between, the establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans, and that's by definition reasonable. No. What if the Overton window in the spectrum is massively out of whack? As it is, then you're just being silly and doing falling back on a lazy assumption. The assumption being the middle point is always reasonable. He's not some above-the-fray, data-driven non-ideologue. No. He's deeply ideological, and he dismisses data that he doesn't like. For example, he's against Medicare for All. All the data shows Medicare for All is objectively superior to other healthcare systems. All of it. Ignores it because he doesn't like it, because he does have an ideology. Michael Smirkanish, you are flat out embarrassing. But this is exactly what I expect from him, because he is quite the centrist, corporatist neoliberal, even though he thinks he also is just a data-driven non-ideologue.